Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Brewhouse Art Studio. And I guess this is a tip of the day / tutorial, whatever you want to call it. We'll go with tutorial on this one. So I think we all have had this problem if you've been doing any sort of extensive work in Motionbuilder, and you're doing a lot of importing and exporting of data onto your character. And you get this pose bug where, let me go over to my pose controls, and you're doing your animation and you're like, all right, I'm setting my key. Let me make sure I've got my character selected. I'm setting my key here, and then we go to the end, and I'm going to paste my pose onto the end. Get my arm into place, and you think you got it in place, and you set a key, and then you scrub, and you realize the arm has popped itself out. And you paste the pose again, and you set a key, and you scrub it, and it pops out of place. And sometimes a lot of times this happens in the fingers, a lot in the fingers. It can happen in the wrist. It can be, I've seen it happen in the spine. It really can happen with any joint. And sometimes it can be like super egregious. Here, I made one that's like super crazy. So let's say I'm like, all right, time for me to paste my pose on to, let me do a full body pose. Paste my pose on to kind of get things correct. And I set a key and I scrub and it pops out of place. And you're like, why is it doing this? Never fear, I know exactly why this is happening, and I've got a solution on how you can fix it. First, let me tell you partially where this comes from so you kind of understand what's going on underneath the hood. What's happening is there is translation is getting added to the joints, not the control rig, but the actual joints themselves. So let me turn off my control rig or hide it. So yes, the joints are getting translation added to them in some fashion, and here I artificially put these in so you can see kind of what's happening. Now, where does this come from? It usually comes from Maya, of all places. So what will happen is an animator will be animating, and what will happen is they will hit this and they will nudge a joint or a control that shouldn't be moved. They'll translate it, and when they bake everything down, it puts translation. So for an example, if I select this in particular joint right here, you can see it's got a translation of 5 on the X and 0.936 on the Y and negative whatever on the Z. And I took a little screenshot of this right here so we can see it. And if I come over here and I bump it because I'm an animator and I'm posing my character and I think this looks good, and I can do that, I'm going to do that. And if I come back here and I reselect that joint and I come over here and I look at my values, I can see that my values have actually changed. It went from 5 to 6 and 0.9 to 1.4 and so on. So mental note to all of you technical animators out there, when you're giving a control rig to an animator, you kind of have to make it animator proof. So I don't like hiding things per se, but I am in favor of locking things down that shouldn't be touched. So like scale and translation, that way an animator can animate all they want and they cannot translate or bump things out of place. But what happens is you go along and you bake down your animation in some way, and you've gone back into Motionbuilder for whatever reason, and you have this kind of a problem where things are just, you can't paste your pose on. And it's because the control rig doesn't recognize the translation, even though it is technically translating because you baked it down. When you paste a pose on, and try to set a key. Let me set a full body key here. It'll just pop right back into place. So anyways, let me show you how I fix it. And it actually starts from the very beginning of when I'm setting up a character from scratch. Let me go to my bind file. So when I'm building a character, I always have something called a bind take, or sometimes I call it a fix me take. And in this fix me take, this is where I am taking my character and I am putting him into T-pose and back into his standard A pose. And what I'll do is I will go ahead and I will select his entire hierarchy of his skeleton, and I will set a key on translation, rotation, and scale so that every joint has a value on it. So that's his roots. And this take is actually going to fix all the other takes. So you can see that I've got values on translation. Translation is really the important one. So the first thing the next thing I'm going to do after having this established take in my scene, and you can pull this in from another scene that's a good file, is I'm going to go in and I am going to actually turn off my control rig. So I'm just going to turn that off, so no control rig. Now I'm on a skeleton layer. Now what I want to do is I want to select all my joints, which have all of them selected. And I do want to deselect some joints here. So for example, the root and the pelvis, we don't need to do that to them. If you have other joints like weapon nodes in the hands that need translation, you'll want to deselect those. But you want the main joints of your skeleton, anything that got bumped or shifted. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go not in the bind take, but I'm going to go to every other take, and I'm going to select in the base animation layer, I'm going to select all of the translation, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to delete translation. And you want to do this for, if you have a lot of takes in your file, you want to do this for every single take except your fix me take. Now let me get rid of this layer here that I was playing with, just add a new one. All right, then see, translation, all right, get rid of all that. All right, so I've gotten rid of translation, any translational data. The next thing I want to do is I want to set all of my joints to, well, first let me go back to my bind take, the good take. And I want to set all of my joints, which I'm going to double check, make sure I have them all selected. I'm going to go to my key controls, go to animation, go down to take options. I'm going to set it to normal. If they're on multi-take or you don't see anything checked, well, if nothing's checked, that means you have a bunch of things. Some things are checked normal and some things are checked multi-take, and so it leaves them both blank. But what you want to do is you want to select everything and make sure everything is set to normal. What this means is if you move it in one take, it will be moved in another take unless there's a key on it. So with everything set to normal and with translation deleted on all my other takes, if I go to one of the other takes, like take number 4 here, which was really bad, you can see that all the translation has been taken out of the skeleton. And then what I can do is I can go ahead and I usually start at the top, even though it probably doesn't matter as long as you have done all the prerequisites. And you can plot everything back down to the control rig. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to plot to the control rig. I'm going to plot all takes. And it's going through and it's doing its thing. And if I go back to take 4, which is really bad, and I look at it, I can now set a key. So let me key that, and then let's say this is where I want my pose to be. I'll go ahead and set the key, and then if I scrub, I can see that I'm not getting that error anymore. And that is kind of how you fix it. So kind of to step back through the process. First, make sure that you're not moving stuff around in Maya if that's where it's coming from. And then inside of Motionbuilder, you want to make sure the entire skeleton of your character, you want to make sure that it is set to normal so that all joints are set to normal. You want to go to every take and you want to select translation on the necessary joints. So yeah, be sure to get rid of the joints that don't need, that you want to keep translation on. So go and to each take and delete the translation. And then go ahead and go back to your first take and plot everything down, and that should fix those weird pops. And this is probably a much longer video than it needed to be, but anyway, I just figured y'all would appreciate that, and if this helped, awesome, leave a thumbs up and let me know it helped. If you have other ways of fixing this problem, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, so anyway, nasty little translation can sneak in on you, but it is really easy to fix. Until next time, y'all, have a good time animating.